Pye Tun. B, C, D, and P. B, C, D, and P, Aung Pye Tun.
Wait till I become big and he becomes old. I hate him. I hate him. Lift door opened, and to his horror, he found me standing in the lobby, paralyzed by shock and fear. He froze in silence. The anger in his eye disappeared faster than my freedom after I got married. Mr. Contest Chair, fabulous judges, and friends, what would you do if you were me on that morning? You were on your way to work, and you heard those toxic words from this little boy in a school uniform. The name on the uniform said, Gary Tate. He was this tall, a little chubby, and lived in the unit right above mine. Despite those toxic words, you could sense little Gary was saturated with sadness. Because every week, without exception, there will be a couple of nights when the cracking sound of a cane or a belt suffocated and poisoned the air. Little Gary will scream in pain, I'm sorry, I'll try harder. The night before this was one of those nights. Bruises on his arms and legs were painfully obvious of what happened. I tried to ignore, but I couldn't. So I asked, are you okay? I heard about last night. He forced himself back to the corner of the lift. How badly did you do in your exams to upset your father like that? Tears trickled down his cheeks like water from a leaking tap. In a trembling voice, he said, I am 5th in the class. 5th in the class, and this, I don't want to brag or anything, but when I was in primary 4, I was 3rd in class, from the last. And my father didn't even cane me, because the day before, I threw away the cane. Of course, I got spanked for that, but my parents always made sure I knew that I was their priority and not some exam results. Gary's parents, their priority was results and not relationship. No wonder they couldn't see the cancer growing in the center of their relationship. I remember a story my grandfather told me about life and priorities. He said long ago, there was a master and a student. One night, the student approached the master and asked, Master, what is life? Puzzled by the profound question, the old master said, life is something between B and D. Confused, Master, what is B and D? Birth and death. So what's between B and D? Clearly annoyed, the old master screamed, you fool! Of course, between B and D is?
C.
C. C is the choices we make between our birth and death. And the choices we make depends on the priorities we set. My grandfather was a funny man, because he called me Big Nose. Stop staring at my nose. He said, Big Nose. Wrong priorities lead to wrong choices. Wrong choices lead to wrong actions. And wrong actions lead to regrets in life. Do you have any regrets in your life? Last Sunday, my wife screamed at me. How come none of you seem to be surprised? The reason? I was too busy chasing my dreams. A promotion, a master degree, and a speech contest that I forgot. And I did not have time for my son, who was 16 months old, and my wife, who was 8 months pregnant. I always locked the door so that my son couldn't disturb me when I practiced my speeches. But that Sunday, he kept crying and crying outside the door because he wanted to come in. Out of frustrations and more of insanity, I opened the door and screamed at my crying son. He couldn't speak a word, but the looks on his eyes told me that his castle had collapsed. My wife came rushing in and embraced our son, and she said, "What's wrong with you? What is more important, your son or your speech?" I realized that day that I was becoming the person I hated, Gary's father. And I also realized that anger can make my wife smarter. I apologized to my son and played with him the entire day. And it never felt better in my life. The lesson I learned from all these experiences is when you get your priorities wrong, you hurt your loved ones, you hurt yourself, and you destroy relationships. And when you get your priorities right, I promise you, nothing can be more beautiful than life. So ladies and gentlemen, search your soul, check your choices, and most importantly, get your priorities right.